Sometimes I read certain Bible verses and I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Like, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Am I the only one who reads that and thinks, pay your taxes, quit whining, and stop trying to use scripture as a get out of the IRS free card? Now, some people think render unto Caesar is a political weapon instead of a spiritual boundary line. And every election cycle, it seems like half of the country acts like Jesus was out there handing out sovereign citizen starter kits. So today, I'm going to break down what that verse actually meant, what society is supposed to look like, why trickle-down anything is a fairy tale, and whether unicorns really do poop cupcakes. Spoiler alert, they don't. Let's get into it. So here's the setup. Jesus gets approached by the Pharisees and the Herodians, two groups who hated each other almost as much as they hated him, and they ask, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? Now this is what is referred to as a lose-lose, politically weaponized gotcha question. Because if he says yes, then the people are going to call him a Roman bootlick, but if he says no, then Rome is going to nail him up on Thursday, and this is way ahead of schedule. So, what does Jesus do? Well, he holds up a denarius coin that's got Caesar's face stamped on it, and he says, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. Translation, if you're using Caesar's money, you're living under Caesar's roads and laws and aqueducts, so pay your taxes. But don't confuse your civic obligations with your spiritual ones. This wasn't an endorsement of empires. This wasn't big government good or small government good. This was keep the earthly and the divine in their own lanes. From what I can see, it kind of looks like Jesus was laying out the earliest sketch of the separation of church and state long before anybody had the vocabulary for it. So, if we take that seriously, if we actually render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, then we're talking about running a society, not a private clubhouse. And that brings us to a distinction that should be obvious, but somehow, at least to some people, it is not. There is the social versus the societal. Social is how we treat each other in line at the grocery store, while societal is the infrastructure that keeps a country standing upright. Schools, hospitals, roads, safety nets, electricity, water, sanitation, civilization. A lot of people out there like to try and warp and twist and distort that when they hear the people they can't stand trying to argue on behalf of equal civil human rights and in favor of dismantling a system that has served to intensify the disparate economic inequality in America and around the world by saying things like, I don't think he knows what he means when he talks about all that free stuff. So let's talk about all the free stuff nobody thinks about when they're saying, I don't want to pay no more taxes. While this is not a comprehensive list, I think it's a pretty good start. For brevity, let's go alphabetically, shall we? Airports, bridges, educational programs, electrical grids, emergency services, law enforcement agencies, parks and recreational facilities, railways, roads, public transit systems, sewers, telecommunications, including internet and connectivity and broadband access, tunnels, and water supply. And then there's also public infrastructure that is owned or available for use by the public, represented by the government, which includes aviation infrastructure, critical infrastructure, energy infrastructure, information and communication infrastructure, infrastructure-based development, municipal solid waste, public capital, public works, rail transport, transport infrastructure, sustainable urban infrastructure, wastewater infrastructure, and water supply network. All of the stuff that simply springs forth from the magical fountain of money that comes from Washington. You can have terrible social behavior and still function as a country, but once the societal structure collapses, everything else goes with it. People have got to hand the coins over to Caesar so that Caesar can keep the lights on. This is where we hit the part of the movie where the ominous strings start playing. For a century now, America has been trying to grow a garden using a method called trickle-down economics, which is like saying, we'll water the tallest tree, and if enough water runs down the bark and drips onto the ground, maybe the seedlings won't die. Here's another spoiler alert. they die. You don't build a healthy ecosystem from the top down. Yet here we are, year after year, insisting that if we just keep giving more tax breaks to the upper 1%, eventually they will remember the rest of us actually exist. Let me try reframing it using the lifeboat problem. Imagine the ship is sinking. We have enough lifeboats for everybody, enough food, enough oars, enough space. But the upper 1% say, actually, you know what? We'd like 3 lifeboats each, plus all the silverware, plus the band, plus the ocean. And everyone else is standing on the deck like, we can see you doing this, right? This isn't a moral failure of individuals, this is a structural failure of the system. The way our societal framework allocates resources. We're trying to run an entire country on vibes, wishful thinking, and billionaire trickle magic. 10 of the last 11 economic recessions began under Republican presidents, and we are about to hit a full dozen with Donnie going 2 for 2. Cue the sad trombone sound effect. Mwah, 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 mwah. And the wealthiest politicians are still promising that this time tax breaks for a couple of few hundred billionaires and raising taxes on the poorest folks who are hanging on to the bottom rung by bloody fingernails while taking away their health care will most definitely work with the big beautiful bill. This time for sure. It's definitely going to happen. Yeah, sure. And unicorns poop cupcakes. Look, nobody has ever solved taxation. It's the world's longest running math problem. But do you know what we have now that we didn't have back then? Artificial intelligence that can gerrymander voting districts down to the individual house. Are you going to try and tell me that the same technology that can slice a neighborhood into 47 microdistricts based on who bought little chocolate donuts last Tuesday can't calculate fair, smooth, micro-incremental tax brackets? We can build a progressive tax model where the minimum wage worker pays a sliver of every dollar, the middle class pays a slightly bigger slice, the upper middle class pays a bit more, and the rico suave multi-gazillionaires pay in percentages that reflect reality, not by force, not by ideology, not by slogans, but by math. And suddenly, everyone is contributing their fair share into a system designed to care for all citizens, not to punish the rich, not to steal from the makers, just the normal adult obligation of living in a society that isn't collapsing in real time. So let's get back to Jesus. That line, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, wasn't a loophole or a threat or a free market manifesto. It was a reminder that you live in a society, you benefit from it, and you contribute to it. And your soul belongs to something higher than politics. The twist, the big final act reveal, is that in a democracy, je suis César. I am Caesar. You are Caesar. We are all Caesar. We are the ones deciding how the money flows. We are the ones deciding what the societal structure looks like. We are the ones shaping what future generations inherit. In other words, ask not, what do I owe Caesar? Ask, what do we owe each other? So maybe it's time for the nation to grow up a little, to stop pretending society runs on individual heroics and bootstraps, to stop acting like trickle-down economics is anything more than a bedtime story for the upper 1%, to stop waiting for magical unicorns to poop out cupcakes into gruel bowls of the poor. A functioning society isn't a fantasy. Like everything else in life, it's a choice. Even more than that, though, it's a responsibility and an investment, but mostly it's care. And it starts when we stop dodging Caesar and start deciding what Caesar should actually look like. It looks like the eyes you see in the mirror, and the eyes of all your friends, neighbors, co-workers, and every stranger that you may pass on the street. And be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. Know that I love you and that I'm always with you.